Hey parents, Tim Wright here, the Wonder of Parenting podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. If you are raising a daughter or daughters and you are wondering, how do I help my daughter sort of find her niche in life, find her purpose, her vision, you have come to the right place, because we have with us today the foremost expert on all things girls. And we're actually gonna really build this up. This is Dr. Michael Gurian, New York Times bestselling author, has written many, many books on boys and girls. And Michael, as always, welcome to the Wonder of Parenting podcast. It's got your name on it, so it's your podcast.
Thank you for having me and for the great hyperbole.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's hyperbole. I think there's a lot of truth there. But we're going to talk today about girls, and then next week we'll talk about boys. And it's kind of helping them find sort of their niche, their place in life, which in future or past generations, even in past history, we were intentional about building this in boys and then in girls. But a lot of that now is being shaped by forces over which we oftentimes feel we have no control, whether it's phones or whatever it might be, social media. So we want to talk about how do we help our girls sort of tune out all of that noise and really listen to who they've been created to be. We are brought to you, as always, by the Army and Navy Academy. The Army and Navy Academy is a private all-boys military boarding school for grades 7 through 12, located on the Pacific Ocean in Carlsbad, California. As a Gurian Center for Excellence, they use brain-based research to help boys thrive. Their structured environment, exceptional teachers, and leadership programs align with how boys learn best through hands-on experiences, mentorship, and challenge. For over 114 years, Army and Navy Academy has been shaping virtuous young men by instilling confidence, character, and purpose. Discover more at armyandnavyacademy.org. That's armyandnavyacademy.org. So, Michael, let's start first with thinking about, in the past, how cultures would instill a vision into girls. And I'm gonna make this really broad, so you can go wherever you want. And what is it today that's distracting our girls, our daughters, from really discovering who they were created to be?
Okay, yeah, great question. I in the past, a lot of who girls were going to be, right, training around that, let's say, in their development and upbringing, was based on social roles, which were based on sex roles, which then became gender roles. We call them gender roles, but they were sex roles. You're female, and so your role will be, blank. And so go back 100, 150 years, your role, who you are, your sacred vision for your life. I mean, right? A lot of it was in there. You're going to get married. You're going to be a mom. There's going to probably be some work, that you're going to do, but you're mainly, once you have kids, it's going to be about being a mom, or you'll have to balance work and being a mom. Right. So, and then you're going to raise your kids, and you're also going to, help your spouse and your husband. And that, right. It was that was very clear. And so girls were raised in that. And if they rebelled against that, and kind of branched and went their own way, they rebelled against that. But the sacred vision was through that conduit of role. And then we start about 100 years ago. Also, we start kind of the early feminist, and that starts to break down. And then especially 60s, 70s onward, then the sacred vision is not coming through religion. It's not coming through traditional roles, etc. It's becoming more individual, and it's also dividing into groups or sort of tribes. There's sort of the feminist tribe, and this is how it's going to be for you. This is what you should do. And in fact, you should, which means don't do any of that, right? What you do is you do your own thing. And then, so you have to define it yourself, what you're going to be as a woman. And that, of course, has been, great. Obviously, it's been great in that now females are not sent down one path. And at the same time, it means now that that there isn't agreement in a society on what the role of a woman will be, and there doesn't necessarily have to be agreement, but without that agreement, then we do have a lot of girls that sort of fall through the cracks because they're not really being raised with a vision on what it is to be female and become a woman, develop as a girl into a woman. And then if they're not in a religion, which a lot are not, and then if they're not, going to do traditional social roles, then, which I would say probably right now, I don't know, half or more, probably more of our girls are not being raised through for a role in religion and not being raised in traditional social roles. So that means that, most of our girls are having to develop it themselves and or with a little bit of help from parents and mentors. And then that brings us sort of to now. So, but that's how it was done in the past.
Yeah. So part of what I'm hearing is that for a long time, vision was tied to role.
Yeah.
And we really haven't lived in that kind of world, most of us, for a long time now. I mean, we've worked hard to try to distance role from vision for life.
Yep.
So part of it then is helping our girls find maybe a better word for vision would be fulfillment. How do we help our girls feel fulfilled no matter what roles they take in life and feel good about the decisions they make and what will guide them as they go? And I think that has been probably one of the challenges that continues to hover over, I think is what you're suggesting, that continues to hover over our girls. Am I supposed to be a mom? Am I supposed to be out in the workforce? If I'm out in the workforce and then I want to be a mom, what am I going to lose out in the workforce? Where vision for life is really tied to those roles, and it's hard to separate them. So then maybe the deeper issue is not so much vision, but fulfillment and just feeling good about the decisions we make.
Yeah. I mean, I like vision. I think that's a great word, Tim, and fulfillment's a great word. Yeah, I think we all know what we're getting at, and it's part of an advantage for female, and also I could say as a disadvantage, is that some of their, well, let me to what you just said, we probably use the word identity more now than role, right? We hardly use the word role.
Right.
Our obsession now more is with identity. Like, what's my identity? I have to establish my identity. So let's say I'm a girl, and I'm moving into adolescence. Okay, what's my identity? And girls are often now tribalizing identity or connecting with a certain tribe for what their identity is going to be. And so this will be my identity. And a lot of that is coming through social media. Yeah. But a lot of it's coming through peers, friends, and some is coming from parents and mentors and grandparents. Like, they're all trying to establish an identity. And so we should think that, right? Because that's going to, as we discussed today, more into social media and these other influences, what is being influenced is identity. And for girls now, with going back to the advantage thing, girls have always sort of had an advantage, what some people consider a disadvantage, in that they will internally and biologically have to establish a certain role or a certain identity, a certain kind of social functioning, and even get some of their self-esteem through what's going on internally with oxytocin, with, only having 300 fertile eggs in a lifetime, right? Whereas males have trillions and trillions of sperm. Females have, these 300 or so fertile eggs in a lifetime. And so much of what's going on in the female body and brain connects with as you know, evolution. I mean, it connects with the evolutionary principles, which is reproduction. And you know, it doesn't mean every girl has a child, but there's a lot of that going on, and every woman knows it, right? Every woman knows it. She goes through a cycle every month, you know, where all of this is happening. And so an advantage that female identity development has is, if they choose, you know, they are going to, as adult women, have some of their identity and some of their self-esteem be absolutely tied to the biology of having children, and not all, but some,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so then for many, identity as a mother takes care of it. Like, that is what they want. They want to be a mom, that, you know,
Right.
mom, probably slash spouse, and you know, and that's their identity. Takes care of it. So that's an advantage in identity development. And then I know let's go to break, and then we can talk about disadvantage.
Okay. You're listening to Wonder Parenting Podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. And we are talking today about how we can help instill a good vision in our daughters for who they are, a sense of fulfillment, identity. We'll be back with you in just a moment. The Wonder of Parenting Podcast. All right, Michael, you were talking about what could be an advantage for girls in terms of identity, and that's the biological imperative for many of them to want to have children, be a mom. There's some disadvantages to that.
Yeah, and then the disadvantage then is the sense that that's especially a feminist, post-feminist concept, and that actually I think makes sense. You know, to me, having raised daughters, having a wife, Gail, you're like, yeah, the disadvantage can be, well, I don't want to be limited to that as a woman,
Right.
and so I want to plan out my life and my identity as a woman so that it is more than being married and having children. Okay. So, and more than having children. So yeah, disadvantage, advantage have to get weighed. And where we are now, you and I've talked about this before. I know that the pendulum swung the other way. Like, okay, we don't want to be, no woman should be stuck in being a wife and mother. Okay. So therefore, women can have everything. Like, women
Right.
can be everything, you know, and that went way the other way. And I think now we're in the disadvantage category, you know, kind of a double-edged sword, because it could be a disadvantage to getting too locked into, you know, I'm going to be a mom, but can be a disadvantage to be saying I'm going to be everything, because no
Right.
one can be everything. And so that's one of the reasons that I really hope parents will help their daughters to develop their identity, in part based on, you know, this biology, because it's there. Why fight against it? Even if they choose to never have children, I think it's okay to say, hey, maybe you'll become a wife and mother. Maybe you'll become a mother. I mean, it's fine to be a part of a girl's identity, even if she doesn't use that. And then their talent set, like we need to be helping them figure out their identity via their own talent set, via their own, you know, genetics, let's say, via their own assets. And so that they pursue identity along the lines of their assets. And some of the assets that they're going to have, and some of this is biological via oxytocin and all of that, some of those assets are going to be social, emotional, and they're going to be connective, right? They're going to be assets in which they connect, in which they manage other people, in which they're involved with other people, you know, which they become the social glue, or, you know, whatever it is. Some of that social emotional identity is great too. And some of that's going to be in their talent set. So I think we can help them develop this identity. Some people would still call it a role. I think we're going to call it identity. We can help them develop this identity through these multiple channels, through all that, you know, biology and brain biology, through their talent sets, and also through looking at their social emotionals, you know, their soft skills, and helping them develop identity there, and without having to say, well, you can have everything, because that is a message that really can harm girls as they develop. It can create so many stresses for them in adulthood. Now they're adults, and because they don't have everything, right? They somehow think, well, you know, I don't have an identity. My life is over. I have not fulfilled myself. And going to your word fulfillment, they feel like they haven't been fulfilled and they can't be fulfilled. Whereas we want to train them for the idea that they can be fulfilled. They just have to focus on certain things and fulfill those. And that's what I think you're getting at with like purpose and vision.
Right. So this is really an oversimplification, and we're going to talk about this next week when we talk about purpose in boys. But one of the things that I will often talk about is boys are made up a lot of testosterone. It's an action hormone, energy hormone, get it done hormone. And for me, metaphorically, it seems to speak to the purpose of boys, that the purpose of boys, whatever role they take on in life, whatever they do, their purpose is to build a better world. Seems oversimplified, but it kind of gives a through line. Whether I'm a dad or a grandpa or I'm a social worker, insurance salesman, part of my role my purpose in life is in my roles, in my jobs, whatever, is how am I contributing to make the world a better place? Is there a through line for our daughters that we can instill? Because it sounds a little bit more complicated, I think. And maybe it's because I'm a guy. I don't understand the female world, but you've got all the biological stuff. You've got the identity stuff. You've got, of course, the gender war stuff that we've been going through. Is there a through line so that no matter where girls end up, whatever roles they choose, whatever their identity, this is their through line that holds them through all of life's choices and decisions, all the ups and downs?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think we could say the same about girls, although I see what you're saying, and I'm going to respond to it. I do think we could say the same about girls, though, and say that their through line is to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
But they might get at it a different route. Like, you know, you're absolutely right. 10 to 20 times more testosterone, you know, in our male systems. Yeah, it's going to create. So the distinction I make is between a performance imperative and an intimacy imperative.
Yeah.
And of course, both males and females have both, right? We all have a performance imperative and we all have an intimacy imperative. Okay. But at the same time, to your point, boys tend more toward the performance imperative. And in fact, that's fine to direct them more toward that. We want them to be motivated. We want them to be active in making the world a better place. Now, and so for girls, they also have a performance imperative. Absolutely. They're really good performers and high performers. And they, because of higher oxytocin, less testosterone, and female brain, and all the things we've talked about, male female brain differences, they can tend more toward an intimacy imperative more naturally. Whereas boys have to like kind of really develop that intimacy imperative more because they are not doing words on both sides of the brain. They don't have the verbal emotives, the social emotionals, you know, that as naturally, and they develop those. Okay. So both males and females are doing performance imperative and intimacy imperative, and they're each leaning a different way as they're developing based on their brain biology. And then our society, our families help them massage it to where it's sort of balanced. And so by the time they're adults, let's say 25, by the time they're 25, they have intimacy imperative and performance imperative. They have intimacy imperative and performance imperative, whether they're male or female. And it will manifest differently though, because they're male and female. So then to your point, okay, so males, are going out there and they're performing, and we need to train them to perform toward making the world a better place, right? Toward service.
Right.
And females are going out there and doing the same. And we tend to need to train females, toward service, but also toward, leadership. So because the intimacy imperative often precludes females from, and they have less testosterone, from climbing to the top, right? More males climb to the top, less females do. And we used to 50 years ago, the theory was that's all sexism. But we know now that a lot of that is all this biology at work. And so we tend to, some of it could be sexism, but most of it is I think the biology at work. And so we're training our girls. Okay, look, part of your identity, is going to be to lead. Do you want that? Okay, if you want that, we're going to help you. But we're still, I think, saying to girls too, we would like you to be service oriented and to help make the world a better place. And I'm going to say, we'll go to break, but then I want to talk about the Trinity, which is protect, provide, and nurture.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's hit a break.
Yeah, let's do that. Good. So you listen to the Wonder Parenting Podcast, the brain science approach to parenting. You got two guys trying to figure out how to help our girls find their vision, but we both raised girls, and we are pro girls, and that's why we're talking about it. So we'll be back with you in just a moment. The Wonder Parenting Podcast. Okay, Michael, you're talking about vision, you're talking about identity, you're talking about fulfillment, and now you want to talk about these three imperatives.
Right, and so
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, imperatives is fine. I mean, they are now back to what I think for both boys and girls, men and women, are these kind of a trinity that attaches to identity, and there are just they're a lens by which we can look at and help our kids to develop, fulfillment, what you're saying, fulfillment, right, and vision, and identity. And the trinity I use are protect, provide, and nurture. So obviously that's protect and provide is the old thing, right? Protect and provide. And that was sort of supposedly only male, which isn't true, but that's kind of the old social roles. Males will protect and provide, females will nurture children. Okay. So, but really we're male, female, everyone is protecting, providing, and nurturing. Mm-hmm. And when we become adults, we can train our girls on this early to give them this language and help them see this. Then when they become adults, how are they going to self-measure? How are they going to be self-aware on their role, on their identity, on their fulfillment? I think one good tool is, how do I protect, provide, and nurture? Because that is the evolutionary imperative. I think it divides the evolutionary imperative, which is to evolve, survive, and thrive. It divides that into protect, provide, and nurture to give us some self-awareness and some language. So then we can start assessing, I'm 67. I can still assess myself that way. Mm-hmm. And Gail, when she was alive, Gail could, as a woman, could assess herself that way. Okay, am I protecting? Am I providing? Am I nurturing? How am I protecting, providing, and nurturing? How can I improve the way I protect, provide, and nurture if it needs improvement? So I just wanted to introduce that, because I think that's a good tool. And as we're raising our girls, it helps us. I use this with my daughters. It helps us to give them this language and say, so to be fulfilled in life, you are going to probably most likely need to protect, provide, and nurture. That's how you're going to be fulfilled. And mm-hmm. that allows for, the fact that most women are working and raising children, right? Yep. So the old concept, which is really just the old concept, by the way, we all want to remember that anthropologically, the concept of the woman staying home and raising kids, that only existed for like 100 years. Mm-hmm. It was sort of an industrial experiment. Women were always working, they right. had their kids on their hip. Previous to industrial, they had their kids on their hip while they were, in the fields, harvesting and all of that. So in the past, women were providing too, via work and market sales of their, roots and tubers in markets, etc. So, really what we're at now fits what we always were. Women are working while they're raising kids. Not all, but most are working while they're raising kids, and they're nurturing. And so, a difference between male and female that still does exist, that we'll probably talk about next week, is that still more females work part-time and raise kids, whereas more males are working full-time. Okay, so that's still a statistical difference, but generally women are working and having kids. So, okay, it would make sense then for us to nurture them to see their fulfillment as protect, provide, and nurture. How are you doing at those three things? And when we're raising them, we can use that language, and we can, there's not a lot of protecting they're going to need to do at 15, let's say, or at 10. But it's still good language. There's not a lot of providing they're going to do yet at 10, but it's still good language. And then certainly there can be nurturing. But their schooling is going to be part of their providing in the future, right? Because they're going to get schooling so that they can be good at something. And they can be nurtured to protect. You got to do better with your siblings. Why are you being so mean? Why are you being so mean to these other girls? Whatever it is. So even though it's adult language, I did use it with my kids, and I think it's useful.
Yeah. A few years ago, I read a study that said that women today are less happy than they were 10, 15 years ago.
I read that too. Yep.
Yep. We've seen statistics that social media has had a profound impact on the mental health of boys and girls, but especially girls in terms of depression.
Yep. And anxiety.
Yep. And so it seems to me that along with discussions about vision and fulfillment identity is that question about their very core. And in the end, when our daughters are destabilized by something, and we're all destabilized by things, we maybe aren't as fulfilled as we thought we would be, or the job doesn't go as well, or parenting became harder than we thought. How do we instill in our daughters from an early age that core that keeps them rooted? And this is where we start to get really with sacred talk, I guess, in some ways, however you want to define sacred.
Yep.
What's the core? How do we give girls a core that keeps their head above water when they feel like they're going to sink? And that says to them, in the end, I am a worthy person. I am loved. And regardless of what I'm going through, who I am, this deep belief of who I am is what's going to get me through.
Yeah. It's going to be, resilience there. Yeah. So we're going to be developing their resilience as we're helping them to use language to develop what their role and their identity will be. We're which they'll develop themselves. We're going to help them to become resilient. And that means we're going to be both giving them unconditional love, and we're going to be giving them conditional respect. So the unconditional love, of course, helps to build the core, that sense of worthiness. I am worthy of loving, and therefore I can love. So that's going to come from the unconditional love. And then and that's going to help them with resilience. I mean, if they're worthy of love, they're going to be resilient. And however, it's not enough. To help them to be resilient, we have to give them all the challenges in their development that develop their resilience. So, and as we're doing that, so the challenges are going to be, hey, you got to follow through. Hey, you got to be motivated. Hey, no, you're wrong about that. I'm going to challenge you. And then it's going to be helping them to interpret the challenges that they're getting to help them build resilience. Like, okay, this girl made me sad. I'm going to, am I going to sit here and wallow for days? No, you're not going to wallow. This girl made you sad. You're going to go meet the challenge, and that's going to build resilience. And as we're doing that, you're right about social media and screen time. We need to protect our kids from social media and screen time, because what it does is bypasses, this development. It certainly does not give unconditional love. And it also doesn't give the respect challenges. It just manipulates self-esteem, and they can't, they're too young. They're 10 years old. They're 12 years old. They can't see how this is helping them build resilience. And it's not, it's in fact breaking down any resilience they can build, because it's flashing too many images too quickly of stuff that is not, appropriate. That's not really developmental for girls into women. It usually goes down one algorithm of, this is how you should look. Let's say, this is how your body should look, this kind of stuff that actually breaks down resilience and ultimately breaks down their ability to love and be loved, because they won't feel worthy. So what we do with the unconditional love and with the challenge, respect challenges and all of this, so that they develop to become resilient, wonderful women, that gets hijacked, because they're hit by, every 60 seconds, they're hit by something for 8 hours a day. That's just basically going to say, ultimately, you're crap, unless you look like this.
Right.
And then someone else is going to say it a different way. And then they've got 50 of those and they can't. So while we're developing resilience in them and giving them love, we got to get them off social media and screens till they're, middle to late adolescent.
Yeah. This isn't a religious show. Both Michael and I are people of faith. I come from a Christian background, Michael from a Jewish background. And I think we both would agree, regardless of what that faith thing is, and faith can even have a secular sense about it,
Mm-hmm.
that those who tend to be resilient, who know who they are, tend to have some sort of faith foundation that they're building their lives on, a belief system. For some people, again, it could be a New Age philosophy, it could be Judaism, it could be Islam, Christianity, but there's something about a purpose rooted in something bigger than ourselves that seems to be life-giving for human beings.
Yeah, and for people who are utterly secular, I think that
Yep.
faith, it maybe is going to be in service. It's
Yep.
going to be in making the world a better place. Like,
Yep.
it's not. It probably won't have an icon attached to it, or a story attached to it. Like Jesus would be an icon with a story, of course. And then in Judaism, more it's a story. We don't really have an icon, but it's more this old story. Hey, half the country's secular, let's say. Then it's going to be something else, but it has to be something, and that's what you're saying, and I think that's absolutely right. So if it's secular and you're raising kids, then let it be faith and service to others,
Mm-hmm.
Or pick something else, but that's the one that I always think of as being most useful, because then okay, we are teaching our kids to attach to something bigger than their individual self, and that thing that's bigger is service. So fill in the blank on that if you're someone who's completely secular. Got to have faith in something. Tim's right about that. The brain, to get the temporal lobe, for instance, involved, that's a place where faith is happening. And if we want our children to grow up as whole brain kids, then let's give them faith too, because then we're getting more of their brain involved. Just from a brain-based point of view, that's healthy.
Yeah, and it gets us out of ourselves, gets us surrounded in a community of people who have vision together. It's tough going by yourself.
Yep.
If you're completely dependent on yourself to pick yourself up all the time, wow, no wonder we're so exhausted. And
Yep.
a community of people who support us and we kind of believe the same things together has a way of really galvanizing boys and girls, men and women.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautifully put.
So we have been talking this week about some things around fulfillment and vision, self-esteem, core stuff with our daughters. We're going to do it again next week. We're going to talk about our boys. You've been listening to Wonder of Parenting Podcast. Michael, as always, good to have you.
Thank you, Tim.
With all your insights. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Share this with a friend if it's helpful for you. The Wonder of Parenting Podcast, a brain science approach to parenting.